I would revise that alternate seated to Cheryl Sanger in place of Bob Gilbert, and that's it. And then under 3, review and acceptance of the meetings, I would just drop the Kathy is here out of it. On the second page, first paragraph, first line, ownership of that land is questioned. And then it goes, says the property line may be part of the unphased part or is in easement. It might be clearer to say the property, not the property line, but the property may be part of the unphased part, and then add in there of the subdivision, or as an easement. I think that might clarify it a little bit. And the next sentence, the board thinks it's Cantlin's land. I think it probably should read, the board thinks it's water. Even though we probably did say Cantlin. And then on the last page, about the middle paragraph where it starts with the sidewalk and the parking for the BBTS. It gets a little confusing, and sometimes these conversations can be confusing, but it's a good opportunity to clarify these in the written record. It says the sidewalks, parking, and dorm plans are in the works for this summer, period. Information will be presented at the next planning board meeting regarding these plans. They have a temporary occupancy through Memorial Day, but it has been over a year. When it is permanent, they need to come before the board with a site plan. I think that statement there with regard to when it's permanent, they need to come before the board with a site plan is more in reference to the, I don't know what they call it, skateboard park. It's not really a skateboard park, but I think they call it a rail
box.
Rail box. I think that was intended to refer to the rail box. So I think you could move that sentence, when it is permanent, they need to come before the board with a site plan.
And should it even be before it is permanent?
Well, true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Good point.
The rail box should be.
Yeah, perhaps it should be changed to before it's permanent, and it should be stated after the sentence where it says the selectmen might have approved the rails by the jump. It was noted that the trampoline skateboard looks terrible. Okay. Yeah, I think if you just put that sentence after the following sentence, then it would be okay. Follow in that area.
I have a comment to fill the last page, the first sentence. Does that read correctly? The board would like to get more information on how to get the road built or built.
Don't build, of course. Yeah, actually, on that same page, under the update of pedestrian village study, just a tiny clarification in the first paragraph. Last sentence, by the end of next week, instead of the draft should be circulating, should be the survey should be circulating. So at that point, we're getting ready to get the survey out.
Instead of the draft?
Just the survey.
Survey.
Any other comments? You have any corrections? You have a motion?
Make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are accepted. In old business, just an update. Last month we talked about the Green Peak cut through, and the fence has been put up.
I have a comment on that when you're ready.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, the fence is on one side of the asphalt path, facing the path from Devereaux. It's on the right. And it's a 3-post fence with, 2 sections. Somebody's going to drive up there thinking they can get into the Black Bear parking lot and say, oh, there's a fence over there. Let's go on the other side. And there's plenty of room to the left of the asphalt path to just drive into the parking lot. I kind of think there should be a double fence, not the 3 posts, but 2 posts with one section on the other side of the asphalt path. The emergency vehicles can still get through on the right of the fence that's up there now. There's plenty of room for those emergency vehicles to go through.
It's just a little bit steeper pitch at that point.
Not a
I just went by there this morning. I
Did
took some
you?
pictures, yeah.
Okay, I think that if somebody's gonna bother to go there and say, oh, look, there's a fence, oh, we can just go on this side, they're gonna go on that side. I don't think
No,
it's steep
I
enough
didn't-
to discourage them.
I didn't mean on the side where you're proposing
Yes.
a new fence. I meant when you look at the fence, to the right of the fence.
'Kay.
That's a little steeper drive down.
Not, an emergency vehicle could make it.
Oh, no,
not
no, I
too
know it
bad,
can,
yeah.
but I'm just saying.
Yes.
I think that'll tear a vehicle on that side. I didn't quite look that closely on the other side of the paved,
The other side of the paved thing, there's
Walkway.
plenty of room for anything to go through there.
but where were the cars originally? They were driving to the
Yeah,
right.
because it was closer to as you go into the
No,
thing.
I
But
hear what you're
my
saying.
feeling is they're gonna look at that and say, oh, I can't go there now. I'll go here. That's just my feeling. Go there, visit it, check it out. But I think if you're gonna put the fence up on this side, you gotta put it up on this side. And a smaller fence, because it's a slightly smaller area. But that's my opinion.
I guess we should test it out, see what happens.
Yeah, I don't sit there, and look all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen people occasionally just because I happen to be out and they happen to be doing it.
How about a little tree?
Fine.
Well,
That'd be fine. Anything. I mean, granted, we can wait for the end of the summer and see if there are any tire tracks.
right.
We can do that too.
I mean, the fence should be a clue. Please don't drive up.
Of course, but the type of people that are going to cut through
I know.
are not going to get it or want to get it.
Well, let's see what kind of a problem develops
Okay.
before we.
But just keep that in mind.
Okay.
You'll be our spy in the.
I'll be your spy.
Do this.
Did the fence, does it meet, we had a requirement, this is all private property, none of this is public land.
That's right.
Does the construction of the fence meet the requirement that we laid down in terms of, preventing access? I don't know what the agreement read.
On that side, yes, not on the other
Was it-
side.
Well, is it generally, it covered everything, or did it cover a specific area? I can't,
I think our conversation was pretty general. and
was
didn't get
general
into
that
specifics.
we are that he needs to do it to prevent people from going through.
Yeah.
Because it always strikes me that at some point in time, this is just a private matter between two landowners. It has nothing to do with the town. The town can't enforce this.
Well,
There's plenty of room here for it.
the original approval,
Right.
we did discuss it, so I think we did have some.
So you think it's fairly general. Well, then we should follow up with Bill and see if he's willing to do something more.
Bill is here and I think he met our intention.
I spoke with Chris Hodges, and that's what he told me he wanted, so that's
Yeah.
what I did.
Yeah, it looked like it met our intention from that, if this doesn't work, I
Okay.
have a good point. That private owners can resolve the issue.
Right.
New business, wetland study. We have a presentation from the Wetlands Committee. We lose it?
For the record, I'm David Olars, the chair of your Conservation Commission. And today we have a presentation from our wetland scientist, Cynthia Balkus of Stony Ridge Environmental. So hope you enjoy. When she comes back.
Okay, well, we can wait a
Get
minute.
you plugged in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you put it right there? Yep. See if we can shoot right past it. Got that? Other side, maybe.
Still.
at least this bank, I think, yeah. The far right switch, I believe. Thanks, David.
Presentation.
Is everyone waiting for me? Well, good morning. My name is Cindy Balsius, and I'm with Stony Ridge Environmental, and with me today is Deidre Sargent, a wetland scientist, also with Stony Ridge Environmental. And today we're going to give what I'm going to call a short overview of the town-wide wetland inventory and wetland functional assessment that we did.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Before you get into it, we stream our meetings.
Okay.
We're gonna try something new. So if you could stand up there,
Oh, you
he's
can
gonna
make me
put
stand.
you on camera. So that people
I
can
move
see
around a
the
lot.
speaker. Okay, well, you can move around.
Okay.
We're just gonna try something new, trying to make it more interesting for our
She's in the frame.
remote audience.
Am I in it?
You're in it, yeah.
All right, thanks. Jeez, I'm not prepared for that. All right.
I'm sorry.
Anyways, I'm going to start briefly, basically, how we did this and how we approached the townwide wetland function and value assessment. And first, I'll start right off at the top. That for me, Waterville Valley offered a unique opportunity because of your size. At 500 acres, we were able to essentially delineate the wetlands over the entire town, and that's what we did at a different scale. But we were able to actually use a small handheld GPS unit and delineate the wetlands. When we've done these types of studies in the past, we're dealing with acreage that is 10, 20 times the size, and we always have to start by minimizing what we look at, because I would be doing the study for 10 years. So we'd minimize the size wetlands. We wouldn't look at anything less than 5 acres in size, less than 2 acres in size. But because of Waterville's overall size of 500 acres, step back in, we were able to look at those wetlands that are smaller, and all of them are interconnected, and I think it's an interesting way to view and look at it. The other thing that's interesting about Waterville Valley is when we look at a town-wide wetland assessment like this, sometimes we only see a piece of the wetland system. You would have to cross town borders in order to see the other sections, and municipal boundaries are a very political thing. Some towns are interested in their wetlands, others aren't. In this case, in Waterville Valley, I was able to essentially go up the slopes in what we call a topo sequence and follow these headwater wetlands down to where they come together in Corcoran Pond and in the Mad River. So it offered a unique opportunity to look at all these systems, where they start essentially and where they end and culminate in the watershed. A couple of the objectives, 6 objectives to the study, and I want to make this section of the presentation quicker so we can talk about questions about really what this data means for you and what you can use it for. I don't want to go through every single detail like I did in my initial presentation, but what we wanted to do was provide the town with an inventory of your wetlands. We located it with a GPS unit, and we tried to document all the pertinent data. In other words, when we look at wetlands, we just don't say, well, that looks like a wetland. We have 3 criteria we have to meet to call it a wetland. That's hydrology, hydric soils, and hydrophytic vegetation. So we have to document this. We photograph, we have data sheets, we collect a ton of data. I have another 2 boxes like that just filled with data from looking at all these. We also did a function and value assessment. Not every wetland is created the same. They all have different functions and values. And for a planning board, we can talk about this later, that's important because when you look at planning and how it relates to the wetlands, some wetlands you might have a concern with, and others not as much of a concern. We can talk more about that later. And I also wanted to provide the town of Waterville with the wetland mapping on a large plan and the text report. Do you have some fish you can hang that? Yeah.
And then the last objective really is this data should be incorporated into your master plan, into your natural resource chapter. It's very comprehensive and it backs you up with the data you need for the decisions that you make every day as a planning board. How we did it, we started by looking at all the what we call remotely sensed data. That's the stuff that's done via satellite, aerial photos from planes, NRCS, USDA soil maps. We look at all that data because what that does is it helps me to narrow down my search. Where do I want to look for these wetlands? Topography, things like that. Then we started with how are we going to approach this? Where do you start? I mean, you go out, well, where do you want to start looking at these wetlands? So we did an initial viewing of the town, and we decided how we're going to break it down, how we're going to conduct the field work. Then we started and we collected the data, and we went through and itemized and decided how we're going to collect the data, when, what time of the year, things of that nature. And then finally was synthesizing, bringing all the data together, putting on plans, and in the end, we ended up with a plan such as this. And in Waterville, you guys have your tax maps digitized, which is great because we could overlay it onto the plan and at the same time overlay the wetlands information. And I think that gives you ideal opportunity from a planning perspective to use that data, make it very much usable. So the wetland systems we end up mapping were divided into 10 systems that were based on connectivity, where they were, the watershed, landscape location, and the hydrological characteristics. We have to start somewhere when we're studying these wetlands as far as who's connected to what and how to break them up to identify them. The method we used was the newly revised New Hampshire method. This method was developed back in the 80s, I think, and it was used comprehensively by a lot of municipalities that have what we call prime wetlands. In 2010, they reconvened and they finished up in 2011 and then updated again in 2013, and they reassessed the method. The whole point of this method was to get a number, a quantitative value to help rate wetlands for their functions and values. These are the functions and values that we look at. I'm not going to read every single one on the slide, but we have 3 copies of the report so you can kind of look at it and read it along. But just to give you a little idea of the functions and values that we're looking at, like fish and aquatic life habitat, scenic quality, education potential, flood storage, which is a very important function, groundwater recharge, which is really an important function for municipalities that have town wells, nutrient trapping, retention, shoreline anchoring. At the end, and this is an example of the actual scores, these are all the scores we got for each of the individual wetland systems that we looked at. And Deidre will talk a little bit about that right now.
So this is an example data sheet from the New Hampshire method. And basically, regardless of the function or value, there's a series of questions and answers, and each answer has an associated numerical value. So based on the area that we're looking at and the function we're assessing, we answer the questions, choosing the best answer, and then what we do is we add up all of those values and average them. But something to note, I think, about the New Hampshire method is that you're meant to have an average score for the one function or value. You're not meant to add up all the scores for all the functions and values and come up with one number at the end. It's more for this so you can compare across the board, ecological integrity across all your wetland systems. So we're just going to quickly kind of go over where each of these wetland systems were. They're broken up on here, but just a quick overview so you kind of have an idea of what we're talking about. The first time we presented this, we had these as wetland 1 through 12, but the town came back with some edits, so they have a little bit more personal names now. This is our first one, Upper Snows Brook. This is Corcoran Pond right here, so it's this wetland system associated with that trail area near the pond and near Snows Brook. These are the scores. it's important to note too, think about the New Hampshire method, that the scores are like flood storage score. Some of these are calculations, so it may not look like a big number, but it doesn't mean that that function isn't important for that area. But this one scored relatively high for educational potential. There's that whole nice trail system in there that goes around and through the wetland. There's parking, so it's a great little area for wetland education.
The scores range 0 to 10?
They do, yep.
When you score these, do you give the educational value the same weight as the water storage value?
Well, no, I mean, that's kind of up to you, I guess, right, on how you want.
Don't you average these out?
No. They're not meant to be, you're not meant to get one number at the end of all this. So, like, you average up your scores for educational potential. So you have 7 questions.
So they're kept separate.
Right.
Yes.
So, because some of these aren't as, you might not find educational potential as important as flood storage.
No,
so they're
probably not.
right. So they're not meant to be. It's not meant to be one, shiny number at the end. They're meant to be kept separate.
Yeah, and in this case, if you look at groundwater recharges, it's 7.2. In the context of that function where you're rating it 1 to 10, that's pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the soils in the system, you do realize that groundwater recharge in that system is hugely important. So that's the important part about this in the past, and that's the biggest difference in this method versus when it was first out. You're not adding all those numbers to get one number because they realized what was happening. It's like if you add 2 plus 2 and average it, you get 2. But if you have something that's 10 and 2 and you average it, you get 6. So you miss out on that 10, on the importance of that one function. So that's why we now go through all of them, and each one has an individual value because each town might have an individual preference as to what's more important. Okay? So, and we can talk more about that at the end when you look at what good is this data. Okay?
So just a few pictures of the Upper Snowsbrook area. Next one is Moose Run, which is right in here. It's a series of wetland drainages that come down these slopes and drain through a vegetated swale and eventually into Corcoran Pond.
Deidre, I'm going to interrupt you for a
Sure.
minute because I want to talk just a minute about headwater wetlands, and I didn't right in the beginning. One of the other interesting things about Waterville Valley is these headwater wetlands. Headwater wetlands are hugely important there. They are numerous numbers of what we call wetland drainages and intermittent streams that start higher in elevation, and they're important for many reasons, but one of the biggest thing is the recent studies in the last 10 years have determined that the volume of water that these systems carry and store has been hugely underestimated. We're always looking, this pond's holding all the water. But if you go back up in the watershed, those systems hold an incredible amount of water, not just volumetrically, like water stored in a glass, but the poorly drained soils and very poorly drained soils collect and absorb that water. What does that do? It helps in the discharge during storms. Basically, those headwater wetlands help to moderate the stormwater discharge over time. And when you have the soil holding onto the water as well, again, that helps with that moderation. So instead of everything coming down at you at once, it comes down in a natural moderation. The other thing it does is it helps to store cold water and slowly release it in its basal flows, which is important for fishing in your downstream larger rivers and perennial streams and ponds. They also are very important for wildlife, macroinvertebrates, and things of that nature. Headwater wetlands are huge, and Waterville Valley has a lot of them. It's primarily made up of that if you look at that valley wall.
And going off what Cindy just said, you're going to notice that a lot of those flood storage values aren't very high because unfortunately the New Hampshire method isn't really designed to account for all those headwater wetlands. It's mostly looking at large wetland systems, lots of acreage, so I guess don't be deceived by the flood storage numbers. I guess it's sort of just, that's one, I guess, a little not issue, but sort of lacking with the New Hampshire method. It's not picking up these headwater wetlands. So again, just scores. You're going to see groundwater recharge pretty high on most of these because of the types of soils that are in this area. And just a few pictures of the wetland drainage areas that we saw with Moose Run. Next one was Greeley, which is this area here. Again, it's a lot of just wetland drainages with some pocket wetlands thrown in, and then these orange lines.
Yeah, let me talk about that,
Yeah.
Deidre. When we did our study, there were a significant amount of lots that the landowner asked us not to go on and collect data. So in those situations, what we did, such over here over at the golf course, is we used some of the aerial photo data that we have, which we had some fairly decent aerial photos with great resolution, in conjunction with some of the other remotely sensed data we had, and we were able to also from the road see these areas. And so what we did was kind of connect the dots. If we were looking up here and mapping these wetlands and we came down to the edge of the golf course and stopped, we could see that the wetland continued, and we were able to follow it via all those mechanisms. And so on our report, we used a different shading to let you guys know that these were wetlands that we didn't go on the person's property. We kind of assimilated the data and put it onto the sheet.
Scores for Greeley, again, groundwater recharge. There's some wetland-dependent wildlife habitat. And shoreline acring, those drainages, if they're vegetated along the sides, it's going to help keep the small banks of those drainages in place. And a few pictures. It's one of the pocket wetlands that we saw. Next one is the Upper Mad River. So we're over here now. And the scores, obviously, you're going to start seeing a big change from those small wetland drainages to the river systems. Ecological integrity, wetland-dependent habitat, fish and aquatic habitat, they're all pretty high comparatively. Pictures. And this, we're going through this pretty quick, and all the detailed sheets, and it's all broken down in the binders that we
The
have.
color aerials are a lot better in there too. I think there's some distortion from the projector as well.
So the West Branch, this over here, and again, same thing, just much higher scores compared to the wetland drainages that we saw. And some pictures. Lower Mad River, which is from here, we included this sort of floodplain area in between the two branches and all the way down to the White Mountain National Forest. Very high scores, pretty much all the way around. Photos. And Lower Snowsbrook, so we're on the other side of Corcoran Pond now. Groundwater recharge, like I said, is high throughout the entire town. And the educational potential with all the nice trail systems, that really bumps that score up too.
Yes, that's a wetland. I know that's a question. That's a wetland.
This one, Tecumseh, so we're down here. This was, the scores are a little different than your river systems. We're kind of back to more of like a wetland drainage type thing. Photos. And New Peak. Yep. Okay, yeah, right here. New Peak's up over here by your athletic center. So, again, groundwater recharge is really standing out. But this has a small stream system and some pocket wetlands, so that helps the wetland-dependent habitat. A few pictures we saw from that area. And then Corcoran's Pond. And I will point out that you'll notice down in noteworthiness, we haven't talked much about that, that has 30. That's the one score that the New Hampshire method doesn't want you to average. So it's a little different, but it's things like, is it valuable to the town? Is it recognized by the town? Is it part of New Hampshire's highest ranked habitat area? Things like that. And just the method doesn't want you, I guess it wants to point out if it's really noteworthy, it wants a big score there. So Corcoran's Pond had the highest noteworthiness score.
I noticed a couple of them, the noteworthiness was at 0 and some of them.
Yeah, some of that, I think there's 5 noteworthiness questions, and so some areas just don't, didn't meet what they consider noteworthiness, didn't make noteworthiness points.
What were some of the questions, Deidre?
Snows Brook, Upper Snows Brook area made one because that's in the highest ranked habitat area, which I don't know if you've seen that.
National Forest.
Yeah, it's an overlay by New Hampshire Fish and Game where they break up these habitat types. So most of the ones in Waterville Valley that have noteworthiness points, that's where that came from, is being in an area of highest ranked habitat in the state or region. So yeah, and then I think the other questions were, is it in like a town plan, or does the town find it to be an important asset, things like that. And then a few pictures. So Cindy's going to talk to you guys about what all this means.
It is nice. There's lots of pretty wetland pictures, lines on a plan, and what does it mean, and what can a town do with this information? Well, for Waterville Valley, when you look at the plan, can you put up the other plan?
Which one do you want?
Oh, let's do this next one. See if
Put it right over. Put it right over.
Oh, that one over there? Okay. Yeah.
Put holes in it and place it.
I think the emphasis should be on the plan. That is, what Deidre just put up is the tax map, and we overlaid it onto our located wetlands. And I think from a planning board perspective, right away when you have projects that come in, you can immediately tell in the adjacent area of the lots, are there wetlands there? When you see that on the plan, you automatically know that lot does have wetlands. We've seen them, we've mapped them with a handheld GPS, and if anything, it should be a signal you need to look closer at that area. That's where I lead into how accurate is the information. When you do a townwide wetland assessment like this for other towns, I talked about the size difference, and you're dealing, with such larger areas, so you have to focus on wetlands that are very large. Here we have the ability to map all the wetlands, with the exceptions of the lots that we weren't allowed on, and then we remotely sensed it. But in this area, we've been on, we felt it, seen it, recorded it, tasted it, it's there. We were using a handheld GPS that the accuracy was within plus or minus 15 feet. So when you look at this plan, you'll see this blue dashed line. That is a wetland system that is 15 feet wide or less. And I only used one point on it because the accuracy is plus or minus 15 feet. So I'd probably have a line crisscrossed like this because of the accuracy. So we used one line. And that tells you that there is a wetland there. It's a drainage. It's roughly 15 feet wide, maybe narrower in some spots, maybe a little wider in others. And that if anything, someone that's proposing something there should be showing you where that wetland is on the site. Now, when you get to that level of specificity, you have to do site-specific work. You have no choice, and it's common, everybody does it these days, is, they usually hire a wetland scientist to go on site and flag the wetlands. They're survey located to like 1 in 1,000 of inches. I don't even know what that survey accuracy is, but they're survey located, and in these days it becomes so important because a lot of towns have setbacks to wetlands and or buffers, and every inch counts, so the accuracy is important. And it's also important because if a homeowner needs to impact it for a crossing to get to the house and stuff, they have to get a wetlands permit. And in some cases, it might be just a narrow, drainage, but they still have to get a permit for that culvert crossing. Other areas, you'll notice we give, on the green line, those are larger wetland systems, so they're a lot bigger. And we're able to show that with the GPS unit a lot better. So as far as accuracy, this data is a lot more accurate than any GIS generated map, any NRCS, USDA soil survey, anything like that. It's just short of site-specific data, and it's only controlled by the fact that, we weren't out there surveying every wetland, because that would have taken, about 5 years to do. How long is the data good for? I am a certified wetland scientist and a certified soil scientist. In general, the standards we use for hydrology, soils, and plants are updated every few years. And just recently, in 2012, the Army Corps of Engineers recently updated their wetland delineation manual. There were significant changes in that. And our standards for hydric soils change, and we just updated those as well. And we use what we call the National Hydric Soil Indicator key, and that just changed. So we usually go 3 years.
Did they get more or less strict?
It's not about strictness. What it is about is you learn as you go along. You come into situations that you've never seen. You get more data, more science. So in some cases, it was like, this isn't as wet as we quite thought. In other cases, this ends up being wet, because there are some soils where we still have monitoring wells on to monitor. But overall, the science has really narrowed down, and when you're out there, you can tell based on the soils, hydrology, and plants. So those kind of things change. What we're looking at now are vernal pool criteria. I don't know if anyone's heard about vernal pools, but those can be highly controversial too, because there's only certain times of the year that you can actually document some of the species. So we're struggling with how to be able to do that year round, because obviously when people want to do things, they can't wait yearly. Sometimes, you're working against the clock, you got a purchase and sales agreement, things of that nature. So the other thing were disturbed wetlands, which are always, something that we're looking at trying to make better science with. So 3 years is what we usually use as far as how good delineation is for, because the standards change. That being said, when, I just had a review a wetland I did probably 9 years ago. The type of wetland it was, the line didn't change. None of the standards changed to affect that particular delineation. However, Friday I was just out at another site, and the new hydric soil indicator key definitely did impact where I put that line in that case. So I usually tell my clients it's good for me to check if it's been a while. And right now, at least, in my region and further in southern New Hampshire, there's an uptick going on in the economy. So what I find is I'm getting phone calls from things we did 5 to 10 years ago. Can you relook at it? Is the delineation still good? By my standards, I have to go out and look at it. So, do the wetlands still need to be delineated? My lot, even with this data, it should tell you that they should be delineated, that there are wetlands there. And talk about how long it's good for, and who can delineate the wetlands on a plan. The state law requires a certified wetland scientist, except if it's a single lot and it's for a septic design. A septic designer can delineate just the area around where that septic is going in. I threw together a couple of slides that talk about what you can further do with the data. Oh, thank you. It's a little better. Some towns will take all that data that we showed you before and they'll rate their wetland systems. The state has a program called Prime Wetlands, and I think there's something like 45 communities that have prime wetlands. And the way they rate them, based on those functions and values, comes down to what a town finds within their community is important to them. Waterville Valley has its own town wells. You might find that water quality protection is hugely important for you. So you'll look at the wetland systems and see what they do to protect that function. Okay, recreation. Waterville Valley, that's what we come here for, partially. your rivers, you know, canoeing, fishing, hiking, wildlife viewing, everything like that. So that becomes part of what you're looking at when you're rating your wetlands. Flooding, that's huge, and it's become even more huge over the last decade with all the big storms we've had. And I won't talk about any of the other global warming stuff and the impacts. I just look in the last decade at the storms and the type of damage I've seen done in these systems. So, but that's hugely important here too. And you guys have a large riverine system, but you have all these finger wetlands going up those slopes that hold water. And that's one thing that we found here. See if I got anything better. Can I have one of the other ones?
This is the bigger.
Yeah, that's okay. Just at the top. Talk about it in the next slide. This slide. When you have a project that comes in front of you, one of the first things you might find when you look at this is, you know, why this information is important. What we found in this area where all these narrow headwater wetlands are, these black lines are all culverts. There are a lot of culverts out there. One of the big lessons of the storms of the last decade have been undersized culverts and the type of damage that they have done downstream. We call it degradation and aggradation. Degradation is when that channel, the bank just gets wiped out and then the material's deposited downstream somewhere, blocking another culvert or washing out a road. The damage has been incredible and costly to towns as well. This is one place that if I had a suggestion for the town, is really look at that when you're reviewing plans and making sure things are adequately sized. If an applicant is crossing one of those drainages, they have to go through what the DES Wetlands Bureau has stream rules. And those stream rules are for intermittent wetlands as well. And they look at a 50-year storm and a 100-year storm, and that crossing has to meet that criteria. So that's why I put this slide together. There's multiple crossings out there on all those roads that go up those sidewalls. There are a lot of undersized culverts. I could see the erosion and the degradation of some of the banks was very clear in some of it. And inside here, I have some of that documented in the report. There's things like hanging culverts. Hanging culverts are culverts that are not in the channel. They sit out over, this is a 2-foot drop below. First of all, it's not good for any fish habitat, and you do have dace that travel up in those intermittent streams. Then you have other areas where you have large culverts, and the stream bed bottom's actually been reinforced with concrete, which probably is indicating that that culvert's undersized to begin with, because you have that scouring occurring at the end of that culvert.
So Cindy,
Yes.
from a planning perspective, then who would determine what's the appropriate size culvert?
Well, the DES requires that to be an engineered thing. They can do a quick drainage analysis based on the size of the watershed, the size of the stream, the volumes they'd expect, the soil types it travels over. So, for instance, I'm doing a wetland permit for a couple right now, and they want to cross the stream that's about 4 feet wide. And I have an engineer that he does a quick drainage report, and he looks at the size where it goes and adequately sizes the culvert to meet both the stream rules, but also it protects the homeowner, really, because it can be very dangerous. There's been a couple of instances where roads washed out from undersized culverts and people sitting on them in cars at the time and stuff, so they feel very good about it. I think it adds another layer of safety and protection for people as well. Long gone are the days where you just stick in a 12-inch culvert and call it a day. I mean, that was standard. 2-foot culvert was even the DES was like that back 10 years ago. The other thing that this data helps you look at is, if you have a project that's proposing a lot of impermeable surface. Impermeable surface leads to an increase in runoff, increases volumes, and with all those drainages, wetland intermittent streams and stuff that we documented and the erosion taking place, it's pretty clear that you guys are getting a higher volume of water running off these slopes. So what today, for instance, 2010, 2011, the Wetlands Bureau instituted, well, shoreline protection had been in place, but there were no rules. And the rules came out. And within that, they recognize what impermeable surfaces that don't drain, do and are changing the water courses, surface water quality, especially to the lakes. And it's more than an environmental thing, it's a money thing. Economically, these places are so important to the state of New Hampshire as far as revenue and resource and tourists. I mean, they go hand in hand. Why do we live in New Hampshire? I know why I live here. Why do people travel up here? And so at that point, you know, the state said we need to do something. Water quality was definitely an issue. Sedimentation in the lake, the constant dredging that has to take place because of these off-site areas where you were getting sediment flow in these streams and drainages like that. And of course, right on the lake, the removal of vegetation, all of it impacted that area. And I was on the original Governor's Shoreline Commission, and it was very interesting because you can go back in data and look at aerial photos and actually watch the silting in of these areas. It made sense. It protects the homeowner. A lot of them have second homes, some of them first homes. It protects the person upstream. It protects the water that you drink. It protects the water that you swim in. It protects water that you boat in. I mean, it's huge. And so the rules came from that. I mean, there was enough support for that these rules came out. And basically, shoreline protection takes place in your town, where right after the West Branch River and Mad River commingle. I don't know how many of you are familiar with those rules at all, but it does impact a lot of things. Within 250 feet of the ordinary high water mark, you're subjected to a limitation on how much impermeable surface you can have and what type of things you can do, and you have to utilize and incorporate basic stormwater BMPs like rain gardens, roof drip edges, things of that nature. Some people use porous pavement, porous pavers. It's all related to how much impermeable surface. It also impacts things like alteration of terrain. When you have a project in the state of New Hampshire that has 100,000 square feet of disturbance, you have to get an alteration of terrain permit. That permit looks at all these things: the stormwater, the percent impermeable versus permeable surface, your runoff, your volumes, and they just got rewritten in 2008, 2009. And they really realized the importance of infiltration, which is ordinarily before, the runoff used to go off-site, take it all off, and that was kind of the train of thought. But what they realized was they were impacting the groundwater. You were affecting groundwater that was here by not putting it back in there. So the impermeable surface would block that flow. So now the emphasis is on treatment and infiltration of water at 100,000 square feet. What does that have to do with shoreline? With shoreline protection, you go down to 50,000 square feet. That's that's just a little over an acre. So that affects a lot of lots too. And you have to go through the alteration of terrain process if you're at 50,000 square feet. That's even if your lot is only a little bit in that 250 foot. So if just a portion is, you still have to do that program. So when I put the slide together, I mean, all this data can help with when you're proposing zoning changes. If the town decides, you know, well, this is really important to us, we want to keep it this way. It attracts people, it attracts tourists, people want to live here, it's part of what our community enjoys. You know, zoning might have something to do with what you can do to maintain it. It also can impact subdivision and site plan rules. Oh, that came terrible. That is basically this tax map right here. And that slide is just, again, to magnify the fact that the data can be easily seen on that tax map overlay. So, you know, you already have a leg up by noting on that particular tax map. It already has wetlands, you know it. You just want to see better in site-specific data. Then I leave it off with questions because I'm sure you have some, and I can talk a lot about stuff, so I'm going to shut up and listen.
I have a question about, in the beginning, that you mentioned that when you were going around that some owners did not allow you on the property. And you use topographical maps or air photos or
Aerial photos.
aerial photos.
Yep.
From a planning board's perspective, how solid is your information based on the photos? As far as, is it something that we're going to get challenged on because somebody didn't let you on the property and you really didn't?
It is very accurate because not only did we look at the aerial photo, we looked at it from where we were able to see, and we could see it. What's not accurate is where the line is, which is where, if I sat on a plan board for 12 years, so I would be like, well, I think I want to see a site-specific delineation at that point. You know there's wetlands there. You just need to find out where they are. And it does matter to both. It matters to you and it matters to the applicant. You know, they want to use every available square inch of their property that they can, and that's their right, and that's okay.
So the challenge would be the line, not the fact that...
Right. Right. Yes.
Yeah, for question, and forgive my bad eyesight here, but I'm assuming that map over there actually delineates blocks. You see these are wetland systems, 10 or 12 of them, right?
Yeah, the color coding here is how we broke up the
All right.
systems. Within that, you'll see the actual wetlands, but you
Okay.
can't see that from there.
Right. Is it safe to say that items that aren't in a wetland or in a wetland system, chunks of land, that we don't have to do much with those from a wetlands perspective, from a planning perspective? Somebody should be able to go ahead and build and do whatever he wants to do on those chunks of land. We wouldn't have to go out and re-examine those. Let me start with that. Is that safe to say?
Well, I think it's based on the scale we were able to do in the GPS.
Right.
I think it is pretty safe to say that, but the lots that we weren't allowed to go out to and use aerial photo
That are close.
interpretation, they're close to the wetlands you could see via an aerial
All right.
photo. But I would definitely say that not all the wetlands from those lots are shown on this plan because we just weren't allowed on there.
All right, and then you're saying for areas within these zones, in reality, that it becomes a flag from the standpoint of the planning board needs to go, first of all, look at the data, and in all likelihood needs to do a site-specific wetland study or ask
Yes.
the potential homeowner to do one before
Well,
building
yeah,
can
and that's
occur.
what usually occurs. The homeowner does
right.
it.
So it's still at that stage down to, so the first step is we can use this to rule out things where you probably don't have to do a site-specific study.
At least for wetlands.
Right, okay, for wetlands, right. Okay, thank you.
I think, yeah.
The rating system that was based on the New Hampshire, I can't remember the name.
New Hampshire method.
Had several categories and
Yeah.
so forth. I noticed in looking at how it's rated that some of the questions are just plain old factual. Is there a pond there or is there not a pond there? But some of them are rather judgmental as well. I think with regard to some of the lake road, whether it's permanent, whether it's long-term. And I realize that as a soil scientist and as a wetland scientist, you're well educated in this. But my question is, when you have a rating system like this, what is the stage, or what is your experience, or what is the generally accepted answer to the fact that if someone else other than yourself had done the same survey simultaneously, it's likely that the scores might be somewhat different as a matter
Well,
of judgmental.
Yeah, yeah.
Because some of them are judgment oriented and some of them are not. What's the variation that one might expect to say, if someone challenged, let's say, one of these numbers, what would you expect to think is realistic with regard to percentage of accuracy? 80%?
Well, let's talk about the method first. One of the reasons why this got updated was to take away that variability. In order, it was to make it more consistent so that you didn't have that kind of interpretational difference. We use another function and value assessment method as required by the Corps when we're doing impact analysis for, a project, a development project, and it's called the highway methodology. That one is not a numeric type of process. It has more of what you're talking about. I happen to like that one better because I can interpret things on the ground better, where because there's a road next to the wetland, it elevates it to be a better educational wetland because there's access. But really, it's Route 93. How many people are going to stop on 93 to view that wetland? So it allows me that versatility there to talk about it within my report. But but this method has been changed significantly to remove that. About the only thing where you can get that kind of interpretational unbalance or balance is under noteworthiness, I think. And that's because most of the people in the community might find Corcoran Pond hugely important to you. I think you do. It's in all your pitches for Waterville Valley. But somebody else might say, well, that's just a pond, who cares? So that's where I think you might have some interpretation. But that's up to the community to decide along that line what's important to them. So you're going to see very little skewing of those numbers because the questions, if you look in there, are mostly factual. How deep is the water? How wide is it? How much bank is there? Is it bordered by 50% vegetation undisturbed, 75%? So they really took a lot of that out of there.
So we could assume then a variation of 10%, 20% is possible?
I don't even think you're going to get that on some of it, really.
Cindy, too, I know some of the questions I see, like with the vegetation cover type, I think they keep the ranges large enough that to get variation, I mean, it's between like 0 and 25, 25 and 50, and then 75 and 100, so those are pretty big ranges of cover or type, of vegetation type, so I think you'd be hard pressed to find.
It covers that variability
right.
in that spread.
Somebody that thought it was, 50%, someone thought that it was over 75, it's a pretty big gap, so I think it'd be hard to find that much difference between those type things.
And just one follow-up on that, because it's kind of related to what I noticed in the report that there were maybe 3 choices, 10, 5, 1. And it gave an A, B, C, and for each one of them what it meant. And in each case, one of those numbers was circled, but there was never an 8 or a 7 put in there. So that when you're doing an analysis, it's not left up to the person to put in a number in between, right?
The only thing they allow is they do allow either I think it's a 2.5 or a 7.5 if you really feel that it's really necessary to kind of squeeze something in between there, but pretty much, yeah, you can only pick one 5 or 10.
Yes.
I'm going to relate a problem to you we've run into in the past, and maybe you can help us. And this deals more with the state of New Hampshire. In the state of New Hampshire, it is my understanding there's a law that essentially says you cannot restrict the right of an individual property owner to clear forest, cut timber on his property. If we've got areas that are designated in wetlands, and we decide this is really important, what can we do to prevent someone to just clearing the property anyway and destroying the wetlands?
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
I talked briefly about prime wetlands, that some towns rate their wetlands and they do prime wetlands. Other towns have chosen not to use the state prime wetland designation, And they instead defer to their own. They work with a wetland scientist and they develop like critical wetlands or high value wetlands.
Okay.
The thing with prime wetlands that raise a lot of cackles is that some of the wetlands would not allow cutting, forestry practices in them. And that, with the New Hampshire Timber Owners Association, brought a lot of people together at the table to discuss that. Since then, in those special wetlands that people have called prime wetlands within the community, the forester and logger has to actually get a permit to do the cutting there, where if you're doing a normal cut, you just file an intent to cut with the
Right.
town, and if you're crossing a wetland, you just do a quick forestry notification. So if a town does feel that they have a wetland that the forestry component of that forested wetland is so important that they want to minimize cutting, maybe just allow select cutting, or special BMPs for a certain time of year, or you may not want cutting at all. Maybe it's a awesome endangered plant community, cover type that you want to protect. You can develop that yourself and mark that wetland as that kind of situation. But you should notify the landowner that
Okay,
that's what you're doing.
sure. And from what you've done with the survey and mapping, do you believe that in the town of Waterville Valley, we have areas that we should be examining and declaring them as prime wetland? Because I assume some of these are not prime.
Yeah. I think you have some very valuable wetland systems. For me to say that you should call them prime, it's
that would be our job, but it's something we should probably go through the
well,
exercise of at least looking at it.
I think every community should, because I think there are areas that by protecting them, you're protecting the entire integrity for the community that you live in.
Okay.
It goes beyond just a wetland thing. You're looking down the road long term at every morning when you get up with your cup of coffee, you want to see the same environment that you're in. And you can do both at the same time.
All right.
You can allow development and do that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, question there?
What's the implementation of these plans from a legal, who does it? Conservation Commission, Planning Board, town?
I believe ultimately with the master plan, I think it's a planning board that they have to adopt it. I'm not 100% sure. In our master plan, we adopted the chapter into our master plan. So
your master plan had a wetlands chapter.
Yes, it did.
Which was basically this type.
Just inserted it right in.
Yeah, just to follow up on it, Mark, have these outlines been loaded into the town's database?
Oh, the
GIS.
overlays, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they are available now.
Yeah.
Well, they haven't been adopted by anybody.
Okay.
So yes, they are available, they're in the computer, but we're gonna have to determine what the legal use of them is. Can Chris go out and now say, you're doing X, Y, Z on a wetland?
Well, it's certainly
And
an
what's
aid,
that process, I don't know.
it's certainly an aid to the planning board.
Oh, yes, right, we can give you a map now with a lot that shows an overlay of the
Thank you. Now, a lot of the wetlands, of course, in the national forest,
Yeah, you have a lot that are flowing right out of the national forest.
which by,
Yeah.
they're probably well protected, or protected some.
Yeah, they definitely are protected, and a lot of their trail crossings and whatnot were affected by those storms too, and they've adopted different best management practices to increase the size of their crossings. They get a lot of federal funding to do that, which is good for you guys because you're downstream of them,
Right.
and that impacts you as well.
So they've already started that?
Yeah.
Are there areas where they haven't started it that we should be concerned with, that you can identify?
I don't know. But I know overall throughout the whole state, it became kind of a priority since those storms.
A lot of that above Snow's Brook,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah.
So we should continue to push for some.
Getting back to the issue of where you had no access.
Mm-hmm.
from our perspective, so we can use this report where you've delineated the wetlands through the GPS system and whatever is accurate.
It's accurate to the standards we use. We had a handheld GPS unit that was plus or minus 15 feet.
Okay.
So from a homeowner's perspective, you know, if you have a 1 acre lot and it could be off by plus or minus 15 feet, you want to get that line flagged right out there and get something site specific. You certainly don't want to have more wetland than you actually have.
So the homeowner the homeowner's property that you were on to make that
Determination.
Yeah. Versus the property that you did not. Does it impact what the property owner needs to do, one more than the other, as far as if they come before us and want to do something with the property?
Well, I think they both would need the same thing, is to show their delineated wetland line in a site-specific plan. More so on the one that we just used the remotely sensed data.
Well, that's what.
Yeah. Because there might have been areas under trees in the areas that we couldn't see, and we could see so far on the lot. Sometimes we could see to the other side of the lot, other times we could not. You know, we came from that end, 2 plus 2, trying to put things together in context with the aerial. So, yes.
I understand what a wetland system is now. I didn't realize that it was that expansive. Is that now to be considered? Is the wetland system to be considered a wetland or not?
Well, a wetland system is made up of many wetlands, and they're all related.
So is anything that's within that wetland system supposedly subjected to wetland rules?
Only if it's a wetland, not the wetland system. The wetland, let me rephrase that. The wetland system, and I realized this as I was looking at the block, I want to make sure you don't think that that entire yellow area is a wetland.
Right.
This is how we grouped all the wetlands in there, based on their relationship to each other, topography, hydrological connectivity. And we went around, and that's how we grouped them all, and how we determined, you know, where their functions and values lies, their similarities, their dissimilarities. So within each wetland is a wetland, and it is subject to the state law as what a wetland is. The whole system, that's just a kind of grouping, a net. So just because you live in the wetland system doesn't mean that you have a wetland on your lot.
Would it be accurate to say that's what we used to call a drainage?
Yeah, it's this, and that's part of, when I say topography, how we separated it. It might not have a wetland on its site, but when I was talking, I took that off. When I was talking to you earlier, about impermeable surfaces, if you have a wetland that is flowing here, and you're building something here with impermeable surface, you're taking away the ability for the rainwater and snow meltwater to infiltrate. And where is it going? It's going into that wetland. Is it being treated? Should it be treated? Those are all questions that you need to deal with. So while your question is good about wetland system versus wetlands, it is a system in the fact that everything that gets done around it affects it. So those are things that you have to think about. Hopefully that explains that a little bit.
It's essentially a drainage area.
Yeah. And you have a lot of it. And you have a lot of culverts in them already. And you have a lot of erosion going on that's washing sediment down, and a lot of it is concentrating in Corcoran Pond. Well, we can talk a little bit more about something I get asked to talk about. There are funds available for restoration in the state. The Wetlands Bureau has a program called In Lieu Fee, and that is when a project requires mitigation. They're impacting wetland, and they're impacting over a threshold. They have to mitigate, which is either create wetland, preserve a conservation piece that would protect wetland, or you write a check. and that's the in lieu fee program. That in lieu fee is based on a formula that's designed to incorporate the land values of the town, the cost of doing, say, a creation project somewhere, and some other factor, some other secret factor. And at the end of this little Excel spreadsheet, it coughs out a number, and that's what you have to pay. Well, that goes into what's called the Aquatic Mitigation Fund. And once a year, and that Aquatic Mitigation Fund is broken up statewide by basically hydrological map units, drainage areas. And here in Waterville Valley, I think you're in the PEMI drainage area, and every year the Wetlands Bureau will announce that there's so much money in the pot. What that means is a community like Waterville Valley can apply for funds to a specific project that might restore wetland functions and values, or maybe there's property that the town wants to permanently buy and conserve to protect something, something of high value for wetlands functions and values. There's a little caveat to that, and that is, for instance, if there's a project that occurred that they had to pay an in lieu fee in that watershed area, they impacted certain functions and values. Maybe it's wildlife habitat, maybe it is shoreland stabilization, they impacted a stream. The project that you're proposing has to mitigate for some of those functions and values that got impacted. I did bring that sheet of what is available, and I didn't check the timeline for any applications. Some glasses. All right, yeah, so you're in the Pemigewasset-Winnipesaukee River watershed, and currently in the ARM fund for this area is $135,000. So a town can look at something and say, you know, we think, and you have to submit it, and they have a special group that looks and chooses what gets money and what doesn't. But again, you have to look at the functions and values and create a scenario where you are basically restoring, making something better than was, and depending on what other applications are in at the same time, you might get funding. I actually got funding for the town of Alton. We had Coffin Brook Road, which went through it's a wonderful wetland. It's an emergent scrub shrub ericaceous wetland. And Coffin Brook runs under a bridge, but the road was put in probably late 1800s, so if you took off the top of the road, it's probably still corduroy under, which is, a lot of old roads are like that. But it flooded, went 2 to 3 feet of water went over every storm event. So that really is not good for the wetland, number one, because it's washing all that stormwater untreated into the wetland. It takes away the connectivity for the floodplain that was there. So we put in an application. What we proposed to do was to raise the elevation of the road there by a couple of feet, and we went up about 2 to 3 feet, and it was about a 400-foot section of the road, and we had an engineer come in and design. We used elliptical cement culvert, so there was some roughness to the bottom. The elliptical meant that we could keep it, not have to build the road in some exorbitant height and price and use guardrails and stuff. And what we did was we used 8 of them, lined them up, and we allowed the floodwaters to go in and out in that section of road through those storms. And we had Irene came right after we finished that, so it was great. It worked perfect. In that case, we got funding, $35,000. However, there was also another project in town. Actually, I was doing the permitting on, and that one had an in lieu fee of $85,000. And I'm a believer that if the impact occurs in the community and it works with the watershed and you have a project, the money should go back into that community. And we were able to take those funds and also put it to that project. So it paid for the entire project. So I thought that was a win-win situation for the environment, the wetland, and the community and public safety. So they do consider projects like that. I know they have their favorites. They love land, but they do consider projects like that. So.
Does the
On those applications, I mean, downtown Waterville is in the Pemmy drainage, but greater Waterville, the town of Waterville Valley actually has drainage in the Saco, and I think the Swift.
Yeah,
It's
so it
a
might be
drainage
split right down the middle. I was trying to look at that at their map yesterday. The Saco has no funds right now because I could see that the entire was half split here. So depending on where it is, your project, that would get funding from there and funding from there.
So that funding would have to be in that drainage area.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't really be eligible for Saco drainage
Well-
unless we were doing a Cancanade.
Well, here's the thing. When I look at where everything's draining, that we looked at, you're a giant bowl, and it's all draining out to the Mad River, and the Mad River drains where? Yeah.
Oh, it's a Pemmy, yeah.
Yeah, so really, your watershed divide is going to be at the top of those slopes that surround the community. The backside's going to Saco, this side's coming to
Right.
this one. So you would be eligible because we'd refine that drainage area with site-specific data.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Cindy, it sounds like a lot of the discussion that the planning board and conservation commission would have to go through in determining some of these things is very technical. I mean, a lot of it is obviously community-based and how we value things, but a lot of it is also very technical.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, do planning boards retain wetland scientists on a as-needed basis to help with some of these decisions when we get applications, or how is that usually done?
I've seen wetland scientists retained in two scenarios. One is if a town is looking at maybe developing a wetlands overlay district. In the initial writing of that rules, they assist, with that process. The other way is usually, a homeowner or developer, they have their own people that they use, that they like, that they've worked with for years, engineers, surveyors, and wetland scientists. They usually do their own work. If a town walks out there and says, this looks wet, they might want to hire a third party to review it, and that's the other point where I see that happen. So it's up to the boards and the board discretion on what kind of assistance they want, what kind of help, and basically is to get it right in the beginning. In my opinion, get it right in the beginning. Leave some flexibility. Look at what's important to the community. Have it well documented in your master plan, and then you're in good shape, I think. Okay. Well, good. Thank you.
Thank you
Yep.
very much for the
And-
presentation, and
Okay.
thank the Conservation Committee. I'm sure we'll be working with you in the future, because I hope you're familiar with the new shoreline protection, because we'll probably be looking for some guidance in that area.
Don't have it memorized yet.
Well, I know they've had significant changes since the original proposal.
Yeah, my understanding, a lot of that has impacted where we are. Along the rivers, there's been a lot of changes.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, good. We left 3 copies, so.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, I guess the question might be for Mark. This wetland system identification map in this format, would that be possible for the board members to get a copy so that we can?
That's what that overlay is, yes. We will, that's what we were talking about, it is on our system.
Okay, but I mean,
Put it in their notebooks.
can we either put it on notebooks or get it in a PDF or something and put it in the computer?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And, Ray, not for today, but I think there's some from my perspective, some very interesting questions that came out of this that I think at future planning board meetings, we need to come back and revisit. I've got questions like, do we have a prime wetland? I don't know. But I think we ought to try to figure that out. And I think we ought to think about systems and wetland-specific areas relating particularly to single-family home sites. Do we need to change the rules and regulations? I don't know, but I think we need to talk about that.
Yeah, I would agree, and
Yeah.
not sure how we would interface with the Conservation Committee.
Yeah,
And that's
well,
what I need to talk to town council about the adoption. Making it part of the master plan is your function.
Right.
Does the Conservation Commission have to adopt it, like with a vote, or is it the Board of Selectmen, is it town meeting? We'll find out what gives it some legal meaning.
Yep, okay, great. And you can report back to us maybe next month. As far as like the prime wetlands, would we be asking the Conservation Committee?
I have no idea, but I think we ought to look through and try to figure out, do we have such a thing?
Yeah.
And if so, what does it mean to us? I don't know, But I'm more concerned, likewise, about the, it's one thing on larger development projects which go through site plan review. But when you get to individual home sites, they don't go through site plan review.
Right.
So now you got a home site that sits up there, either you could look at one criteria being it sits in an area that they found to be the boundary of a wetland. So that's, now what do you do? Do they have to do any additional work or anything? Or suppose it sits in the system, are we going to require somebody to do some additional work as well to say, no, I don't have any wetlands? I mean, one of the things that I heard them say was, here's you got these areas, but in reality, to make decisions, you got to go back and revisit each one of these on an individual basis to determine whether it does or does not conform to the state. The positives are, if you're not in this thing, you shouldn't have to do anything. It would seem to me that if you're not in one of these boundaries, we can reasonably say, okay, you're free to do what you want.
Except probably a homeowner's property that's in a system, and how what they're doing is going to affect the system, even if they don't have the wetland.
Right. No, I'm saying if you're
runoff.
not in a system, though, then I'm thinking, maybe we could say you don't have to do much, you don't do anything, But anyway, these are just questions. I don't want to answer them today.
And
But I think it's things we need to talk about.
Yeah, to add to the complication, was there a list of places where they could not go on, or that might have been blocked by the aerial views?
Well,
Do we have
she's got dotted lines on the maps, and so it gets down to, again, to me, if you're close to that dotted line, it probably means that before you do, anything gets done, you have to send somebody back out there again and now go on the property.
Well, are there any parts of town, the privately owned parts, that are not in one of the 12 areas?
Oh yeah, well, lots. Oh yeah, I just looked at her map. There are, I would say half the land that's privately owned is not in a system.
Yeah, I think that's.
There's something like that. There was a fairly good chunks of land that weren't in any system.
Really?
Yeah. All the stuff over on the north side is not designated as being in any system.
I think in a lot of cases, when she spoke with the Conservation Commission in the more detailed presentation, the water just isn't here long enough to really be, it's just drainage, it's gone. And it gets into the river, or it gets into the pond, or the other areas that they classified as well.
One of the things she did stress at that meeting, though, was the water storage areas are super important to moderate the initial flow.
Right.
Would it be up to the Conservation Commission to determine which would be the prime wetlands of the area? I mean,
I guess you'd start there, right?
Well, like, there's a legal definition of a prime wetland, and then, like she said today, the town can have other definitions for critical or important, or you can make your own definition of what you wanna do. So, that's part of the legal question that I have for
Okay.
town council is, you know, there is, I believe, an actual regulation on what a prime wetland is.
And I believe, without knowing the specifics, I believe a prime wetland by those legal definitions is probably larger than anything we have in Waterville Valley, so it's more important that we make judgments as to what values are important to us, and those value scales, I think, will come in handy in discussing that.
But the good news I heard is if there were such areas, and I'm not sure there are, all right? But if we designated them, we might be able to get rules that say, before you can do anything, you have to have an intent to, you have to go get a permit for an intent to disturb the land or an intent to cut.
Right.
Because I'm very concerned about this loophole
Yeah.
that sits out there that says, as long as I don't apply for a permit, I can go cut anything I want. Now, and I'm okay with that in 99% of the property, but if there are critical areas, I'd like to say, okay, you can't do that here.
Yeah, I think
If.
it's really important.
Yeah, it's all
that-
if, yeah.
Yeah, over the next relatively limited period of months, that we do have these discussions, as Bill said, ongoing in the planning board and come to some decisions.
Might be a joint meeting with the conservation.
Yeah. I think it's very connected to the conservation.
Right?
You know, I mean, I don't think it's just a planning board. I mean, yes, we need to discuss it here, but I think.
Right, but again, you know, waiting to hear what the attorney for the town says,
Right.
the Conservation Commission is an advisory
Right.
to you guys and to the selectmen. We're not a judicial board, so I don't believe that we'll be able to, other than say we advise these areas to be designated as something.
But it might be a
But I
good,
think-
joint meeting might be good just to analyze some of this data.
Yes,
Yeah.
Should
we-
get feedback from both
I think you
groups.
have more.
be excellent.
Should we do that way, sort of once we get the information from Mark as far as legalities and whatever, like a planned 1 or 2 workshops with the,
Yeah.
with the committee?
I think a workshop would be a good idea.
I'd like to get on the bus and go visit the 10 areas,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
It's very hard to visualize
Yeah.
these sitting here. I'd like to go see what they look like, and then, and then we'll talk, you know, and then talk. I think it'd be helpful to talk about them if we had
Yeah,
some
great idea.
idea of what they look like.
Yeah.
You could set up a workshop meeting after Mark
Yeah.
gets back with some guidance on
Yeah.
what we should be
Sounds
doing.
Good.
Good, good. Any other discussion on wetlands, this presentation? Okay, again, I'd like to thank the Conservation Committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Good to see
I
everyone.
thought that was pretty comprehensive. I thought they did a pretty good job.
Yeah,
you.
Yeah.
this is mandatory reading now.
By tomorrow.
Have it all read by next meeting. Let's see,
Is she? Well, that could be, but they're, I mean, it does help with some of the bigger issues, you know, of trying to create some rules around when do you act and when don't you act,
yeah,
you know?
exactly, yeah.
Here goes the master plan again.
But it should
Well, we're
like.
gonna be looking at that anyway.
No, I know.
It should
But we
be
can,
put in the master
we can act on one chapter of the master plan at any time.
Sure.
So as soon as we get that guidance from Mark, I think we should
Yep.
put this on the priority
Yep.
list.
And now there are several copies of the report, so they're here at the office, and I'm sure Sharon will make them available, and if
Yes.
anybody wants to pick them up and spend a few spare hours.
You gotta leave your wallet if you take them.
You'll sleep
Or your
soundly
credit
if you
card.
read that.
guess we'll move on. The next thing is new business. But I'm gonna jump the privilege of the floor, because I think we have BBTS. So, if that's okay with the rest of the board?
We were speaking to Mark and we
Could you
realized
just
that.
identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And maybe you
Kristen?
can,
You want me to come over here?
well, you can just, speak up, so
All right.
everybody can hear you.
I am Krista Katz. I am the Director of Advancement, Marketing and Communication for WVBBTS Snow Sports Educational Foundation. We're here today to get the planning board's insights and input on how to address a couple of specific issues, the placement of our box rail venue and also our outdoor trampoline deck. I did bring plans that show the approximate locations of them, and the plans are the plan that you already have are still accurate as to where those two sites are located. As I'm sure you're all aware, we've been busily engaged in finishing up the training center project from the standpoint of paving, which I'm now learning that impermeable surfacing would have probably been better. And also the portion between the tennis center and the academy building has now been covered with the bluestone, as we discussed. The areas also have been seeded, and this rain is certainly going to help the growth of new grass in those areas. The last portions of those projects are signage. So we are working on developing what kind of signage we're going to have in both sides of the property from that standpoint. So what we're here to discuss is the fact that we kind of missed the date on the box rail piece, which we were supposed to get to you a little bit earlier. But we're hopeful that you can see that we have been busy doing the sidewalk as well. And what the planning board is looking for from BBTS at this point to allow usage of those two facilities, and with a full site plan review to determine whether we can make those permanent locations as per the plans on hand.
Okay, I guess the selectmen gave temporary approval on those two facilities, right?
Right, it again would be my understanding that if it was temporary in use, which is I think what they originally asked for, it did not require site plan review.
Right.
What I understand now is you're asking to make these permanent?
The areas where they are, yes.
Right.
And it's
Well, but I'm assuming the box rail and the trampoline would be permanent as well. And when you say the area, I mean it's those venues would be permanent.
yes.
Right. Then I think it's got to, there needs to be, probably can certainly be, in some ways abbreviated, but there needs to be some kind of a site plan review discussion and approval, I would think, right?
Yes, I think you'd want the drawings, the document, so that the town documented drawings.
The problem is your current thing is expired,
Yes.
May 31st.
May 31st?
And the selectmen's vote was specific, Bill, that it would not be extended again, and that any use after the 31st would require site plan review.
Oh,
And
okay.
we have started completing the site plan review paperwork. Sharon gave me the abutters list this morning. I only asked for yesterday, so thank you, Sharon, for that. And so we are moving forward with that piece post haste.
Okay, so I guess we'll expect to see you next meeting?
month?
Okay, now, I guess for continued use,
Yeah, what's?
Well, the language seems to prohibit continued use. I don't know, Mark, I mean, we made a statement that says it will not be extended, right?
That's what the minutes say, that it will not be extended.
I guess if we made that, I mean, could conceivably the selectmen decide to unmake it? I guess we could, right? Mark, you listening?
Yeah, you can.
We can do
vote
whatever.
to keep it
I think we need to
enforced
put on the, well, first of all, I think we ought to ask the planning board if they post haste, if we gave them an extension of 30 days or something, would the planning board be in favor of that or not?
I would recommend a little longer period of time, because if they come in and, you know, we have 3 months to decide,
Right. 60 days?
60 or.
So the question is, would you be in favor of, do you think it'd be, we should either we're gonna have to tell them cease and desist, or give them an extension of 60 days? You have an opinion one way or the other?
We'll be sitting here doing the same thing in 60 days?
Well, no, I'm assuming that 60 days would forgive them for failing
The last
to
12 months.
obey the first one. I don't know.
60
I don't know what
days.
to do.
60 days from today, or?
Can I ask,
Yes.
did you guys forget about this? I mean, you must have known about it last year.
We did know about it, and I think you're exactly right. We started, a new program this year. We were doing all the other things around the training center, and it literally slipped by, and we're very sorry for that. It was not our intention to miss the date, but it did happen.
Do you need to use it in the next 30 days?
I believe that we will, yes. As the summer programming kicks in, those sites would definitely be helpful for training our athletes. We do have the training center now, but we get a number of athletes, and what we ideally try to do is move them between the sites so that they can get the different pieces of the progressions that they're working on. So, if you're a freestyler and you might learn your flip or whatever on a trampoline, but eventually you want to take it, outside and do it in a different setting, not with ropes on you and things like that. So ideally, it would be optimal if we could have a short extension, but that's up to you.
Well,
But-
is it up to what you're asking is if the planning board would support the selectmen in
No,
changing-
selectmen have to make a decision.
Right, so it's just our
And
job
I'm
as
just
selectmen.
saying, and ultimately, you've got to make a decision based on, the planning board's got to make a decision based on the site plan review process. What I'm kind of thinking, Ray, as I'm hearing you're saying, if the selectmen decided to give an extension, don't box you in with time.
I would recommend, give us that 90-day period.
90 days.
And if that 90 days doesn't start till next
Right.
month, it's really 120 days.
You're right.
There's no sense of them keep coming back.
Well, or otherwise it puts you in the position of,
Yeah.
oh, geez, if we don't approve this today,
Right.
and we hate that, right?
Puts us under the gun.
Right.
I see the, I'm looking for what word I want to use while we're being recorded here. The unfortunate lapse of time, I guess, where you missed coming back, and how the board feels about some of those problems. But we do have athletes coming in, and it's a program, and I think they're working with us a little bit, so I certainly would like to see an extension granted, if that's
Okay.
what the selectmen are looking for as far as opinions.
Yeah, I mean, if there are any other opinions, we'll take them. The selectmen will have to make a decision.
At your next meeting.
We'll put it on the agenda.
Wednesday.
Wednesday,
This
Okay.
coming
next week,
Wednesday.
right?
Mhm.
Next Wednesday.
Okay, good enough?
Well, the sidewalk certainly looked like it came out good.
It did look good. I was a little surprised that there wasn't any space between the road and
Yeah.
the sidewalk itself.
We did that, we changed, we did that on purpose.
I recall that there was some discussion about that, and typically, I think the town requires a granite curb if
Yeah.
the sidewalk is directly against the road. And then there was some discussion about, well, do we really need that granite curb?
Right.
And it was, well, no, granite curb really isn't the Waterville Valley type thing. But I think the town says that if you don't use the granite curb, then it has to be like a 3-foot separation.
It did, but the way that the drainage was, Jim, in looking at that, number one, we wanted to remove the granite curbing because the road is so narrow in
Right.
in that spot, he didn't have any flexibility right or left when plowing. And it's a highly trafficked area, and he needs to have the ability to move around people and cars. So that's why he did away with the granite curbing. Then it became a matter of drainage, and he went out there while they were actually constructing it to get the width of the sidewalk that we all agreed to. It had to be right up against the road. And again, that's a function of we don't have any right-of-way going through there. It's very narrow.
I can't
So,
remember on the
yeah,
plan how.
he did set it up that way.
It seemed like on the plan it did show contours though, and it had drainage. Was it shown up against the road on the plan, or was it?
It was shown against the road
was.
with a granite curb on the plan,
Okay.
and Jim asked them to remove it for safety.
Mark, in the wintertime with the plowing, will the plowing just be extended through
Yes.
the sidewalk? Is that?
Yes.
And will it be clear? I know there's a white stripe, but in the winter it's hard to see that. So
Right.
is it affecting safety for walking on there in the winter?
It actually gives the pedestrians more of an area to walk on while he's
But it'll
plowing.
be clear for cars
It will
driving
be
that
clear,
it won't. They
yes.
can't go that way.
He will clear,
Driving
he will
sidewalks,
clear
stay with
all,
pedestrians.
he will clear all of that paved area.
No, it looked
That's
like,
his
looked to
intent.
me like it was partially striped. The white line didn't go all the way to the end of the sidewalk. I mean, the white line really distinguished the sidewalk, but it didn't extend the entire.
It doesn't go, I think there's probably maybe 30, 40 feet at the end before the turn into the parking lot. But again, Jim looked at that. That was what he wanted.
Will they be striping it?
When we go back, we've already striped for the year. When we go back, we will probably extend that striping to the turn into the parking lot.
Good. Now, just a question on that paved parking area. The paved area is the intended parking lot?
I believe that when we were here discussing that last, that it was decided, and perhaps this is good based on what we just heard from the Conservation Commission, that we did not want to pave the entire lot because there were other plans for potential future building down the line, and that paving is both expensive and time consuming, and that as the lot had been somewhat grandfathered in, that those were the lots, I mean, that was the paved area that we spoke to the town about, and you know, that is what we're going to do at this point, and then anytime we would be doing any, you know, additional building, we would come back to the planning board and have discussions around these issues at that point.
So that whole area was large enough to accommodate I think it was 50 cars or 25 cars, I forgot how many planned.
And once again, we're going to be doing some signage and you know, allocating where places are. So, and then we still have, we did some grading work, especially on the closer section of the dirt part. So, you know, we have a lot of opportunities for parking there, as well as we have the dorm area parking. And then now the Bluestone area.
Yeah, and you said it's been Bluestone? I'm trying to remember were there gonna be room for 3 cars or something in that area?
That's, I talked to Peter about that because they did not pave that. They did the Bluestone.
Yeah.
And that's part of the signage.
Mhm.
There will be the 2 handicap accessible spots down towards the end.
Okay.
And then room for 3 cars.
3, okay.
Along the side there. And Chris has looked at it and he's been okay with it.
Okay, so all it needs now is the signage?
The signage,
Right.
yeah.
No, it looked pretty nice. It looks like you got it grassed in and stuff.
Yep, we're working on it, so I'm glad some of you have had a chance to come by and see it.
The driveway coming from above, the houses, couple
Yes.
houses up there, I went by this morning on my way here. It looks like that naturally feeds onto the new pavement and goes right out to the road. Is that the path that those?
At this point,
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, on your property, do you have plans to make those people go to the far end and get on the road that way, or go, and I'm only saying this or asking this because I understand you're gonna have, students and people walking and all of that, so I'm just looking for that mix as to what either the plan is, or if there's a right of way that says it can be one thing or another. I'm not sure.
I will go back and ask some questions on that, but to the best of my recollection, it is a non-specific easement for the driveway. And there was discussion at a certain point of when and if, a pathway out towards the back exit from the lot becomes possible, that the driveway would use that just to ensure the safety of students, as you said, walking around. For now, we are going to attempt to keep a lane open there. If you recall, around the back of the training center is also accessible with paving. So we'll have, for example, maybe a van coming back from a trip, unloading a lot of equipment into the back of the training center, so it will serve our needs as well. So, but I will double check to see if there's been any formalization of the idea to move that lot off the back.
Any other comments? I think it looks nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll see you next month.
All right. Thank you so much.
The next thing on the agenda is the North Country Council survey. Is this the first time you've seen this? I had an opportunity to look at it, and a lot of these questions are out of my expertise, certainly. Not sure. When's the deadline to having this filled?
I think you had that, you had the cover letter.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
I don't know if I saw a deadline in there, they're just looking for the return of the survey, if that was something that, individually, planning board members wanted to complete, or as a whole consensus, one report, survey back from the entire planning board as a whole.
Yeah.
That's something maybe that you all can look at and over the course of the next month, fill in some comments, and then maybe at your next meeting, you could put one survey together that we could return from the town, from you all as a board, as opposed to individual.
What's the board's thought on this? You wanna do one?
Yeah,
One
I think,
survey or?
yeah. One voice.
One voice? Okay.
All agree?
Okay. Well, why don't we all look at it and fill it in as best we can, and come back next month and we'll fill out one as a town. Okay. Well, that was easy. Yeah, at least that.
Hope we can all agree on number one.
Where's the easy button? Where's that easy button? Okay. What's that? Communications, I don't have any. Committee reports, update on the village, pedestrian village study and surveys.
Yeah, the surveys went out May 19th, I think it was, and we're trying to keep that to about a month-long period, so June 20th, next Friday, is kind of the proposed end date to try to start crunching numbers on the initial survey. Last I heard from Mark, I think was in the middle of last week, we had 300 surveys returned. which is lower than I had anticipated. But as a committee, we're planning on meeting on Tuesday with Mark via Skype, just to kind of go over where he's actually at. You know, there might have been a couple bump ups in survey participation. I know the Snowy Owl I saw just sent out a request to their past guests or their email list. So that might give us another bump up, and it seems like it's still sort of filtering through the community. It's been an interesting process in seeing who's connected to the town on an individual basis and who's not and doesn't really realize they're not. It's gone so far as even to talk to some folks who say are getting Nixle, and they say, oh sure, I'm on the town's email. Like, okay, but Nixle is different than getting an email blast, and explaining all that, and there is still a fair amount of disconnect, and from people who I kind of had perceived as pretty active second homeowners. I am on the Windsor Hill board, and that was, but after a lot of arm twisting on my part, had I not been on the board, I don't think it would have gone out.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, which I found disheartening in a way, because, you know, we hear from second homeowners, and as residents we know that they're an unheard from subpopulation in our community, and they should be heard from. But there are just a couple of hiccups, of miscommunication, of misinterpretations of questions that made people on the board hesitant. And, you know, so anyway, that's why I really feel strong. Our committee's gonna meet on Tuesday, kind of rehash our strategy, both for the next survey that will be out late August, and also Mark Kane is trying to schedule a community meeting of sorts, and he had initially talked about a day of August 23rd, which could be really good because we just heard about the 5K race and craft beer festival that's going to be on the 23rd, so it could be a really good coming together of both residents and transient population, so that could be a good date, even though it's kind of all happenstance. I think that's about where we're at.
How was the action at the Chowder Fest?
It was good. It was you know, there again, a little bit of a hiccup, and where I think we need to be a bit more active in helping. The person who decided where he would be didn't think about the fact that he'd be right next to the speakers for the band. And he didn't realize exactly how loud it would be. And, you know, Mark's a very positive person, and he turned it around. He's like, but it's great. People want to talk to me. We're right in close and we're talking. And, you know, he put a good spin on it. He said, I'm right there, the band, and they can see me. So he definitely had a good, you know, I was a little bit appalled and tried to get him moved last minute, but he didn't want to disrupt things. And he was actually very positive about the outcome. You know, he felt like he connected with a few dozen people who he would never have gotten a chance to connect with, and was very struck by the difference in the weekend population here versus all of us, day to day during the week. So.
Did they ever get to interview post office?
Not yet. We
Okay,
are
'cause
shooting
she's
for a
still-
Monday morning, and it's just, I'm hoping, I've got an email to Mark, you know, theoretically at this point I'm thinking maybe one of us, maybe me, will sit there Monday at 8 o'clock, 8:30, and he'll be on the
I know
phone.
she still
and-
mentions it.
Yeah, so we will definitely
Maybe you
get
can
that.
go there.
Well, I think it's a matter of Mark wants to do it via phone, because he's not planning, you know, when he's trying to be here, it's when they're higher population times, and that's when Ann isn't working, and it's just been that whole not crossing, anyway. But I think we'll just, one of the things we need to talk about as a group is figuring out how to make that happen and get our bodies in there and get them on the phone.
So did your board reminded that there's a survey?
Yes, there was a notice that went out.
Okay. From the condo board?
Oh,
Right.
good.
Super.
Good.
Now, is there'll be a secondary survey,
Yes,
right? Later
yeah,
on?
late August, yeah. Yeah, so there, and the other thing, you know, we had, and again, I think it's all a matter of really communicating clearly. Chris Sununu was great and said, yeah, I'll send an email out to all of our people, and I actually thought I put my foot in my mouth during an email communication that Elizabeth, the marketing person at Mountain was a part of, and I said, well, the Mountain will put the survey out next week. She said, well, actually, we already did it. And I thought, well, how could I have missed that? You know, I'm on every email list they have. Well, I'm not on their pass holder email list, which is what they sent it out to. And, you know, I can't help but wonder if we would have received more responses from the transient community had they sent it out to the more general email list, or if there's a reason that they didn't do that. So, you know, just some of those little things that we're gonna pick apart for the next survey to see if we can't get a bigger response.
Are we tracking, in this, the comments, of the permanent population versus the,
I think that's all part of his breakdown, yeah.
and so we can probably get a better understanding of, part-time, owners
Yeah.
or visitors.
From my understanding, yeah, that's part
So
of how
we can
their
see all of that and.
tracking is, yeah, yeah.
What will be the gist of the second survey?
They're kind of as part of what they're hearing in the early part of the summer, they're using this as their opportunities phases is what they're was kind of going into next, where they're gonna see what the different opportunities for the town are, based both on their feedback from the community at large and from their expertise from going through and seeing what they're experiencing with their backgrounds. So the second survey would be more based on if the town were to implement something like this, would you support it, or, you know, try to get a bit more specific in ways to address the issues and opportunities, from my understanding.
Won't be asking what type of businesses you'd like to see in town, or?
I don't know. When we get to that point, we can certainly run it by the board and see, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like those are the kind of things we'd like to know if people, you know, what kind of businesses they'd like to see, what direction.
Sure.
What they think about the gondola.
Right. Yeah, I don't know the exact specifics.
Well, I mean, it's still discussed on the table, and it'd be nice to get some
Oh,
feedback
yeah.
from.
Yeah.
Given it took us about 2 weeks to get the last survey kind of drafted, and I think that was a bit longer than he wanted, so, but I would imagine by early August, we'd start to talk about specific questions, and we can make sure that we kind of get that information out to the board, if that's what you guys would like.
We'll also have the results from the first survey, so
Exactly.
you're gonna have some input
Yeah.
Exactly.
on which you can build the next survey
Exactly.
questions, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Anything else on that? Any other questions? Okay, I guess we're with that. With the privilege of the floor one more time.
Me. This is regarding the sledding hill. That the last winter, one of the comments was that after the winter it would look really ugly because it was going to be really bare and ugly, and indeed it does. And they told us that I think Sununu told us that he would be putting wildflowers on the hill.
Yeah.
I remember flowers of some kind, so it would look all colorful, bare but colorful.
Right.
I don't see flowers. I don't see color.
I do remember that comment too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely in the
Was that in a
minutes.
planning board meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, it was part of the approval.
Yes. Because
All right.
people commented how ugly it was going to be.
If we could it'd be helpful if we could find that in the minutes someplace.
They are in the minutes.
I'm sure they are.
Bill?
I think the problem is, because I'm getting a lot of complaints too, is that it was seeded with a wildflower mix. And the wildflowers germinate much slower than your typical conservation mix or state slope blend. And they grow slower. I mean, I've been out there, you know, looking like this. And I frankly think that's a problem. I've emailed the mountain, and my suggestion is that it gets overseeded with a conservation mix state slope blend. It's not eroding, it's very stable, but it's not very attractive either.
No, it looks
And so that's what I've done, and I think the mountain might overseed it too, but which I think would be good.
Now, if they seeded it with the wildflowers, and they overseed it, won't that excuse me, choke out the wildflowers when they do come up?
you folks can make a final decision with them. You know, my experience has been the wildflower mixes get overtaken anyway, and you might get some flowers for a couple of years, but even the stuff the highway did on 93 that required tons of maintenance, if you look, that stuff is
All overgrown.
starting to get overgrown too, so.
A lot of lupin which reseeds themselves, but it is getting overgrown.
Anything that
Yeah.
doesn't get
Dead
maintained.
daisies.
Yeah.
It's just
But if
leaving
you
it
don't
as
want it
such and bother
overseeded, you
those.
probably ought to let the mountain know. Or if you want, I'll let them know, cause I emailed them this week and I said, you know, it's an issue for me.
Yeah.
Do you not want it overseeded?
No, it was just a question that I had, you know,
I think
I'm
they
all
need to
for
do
making it
something.
more attractive.
They have to
Well,
do
once you put the
something.
seed down, you can't get it back up, that's the problem.
Send a lot of birds in.
But if,
Can you seed it with something that comes up faster, a different kind of mix?
That's
Use
what
it-
Yeah, that's.
it's gonna be
Typical
grass.
slope
Grass.
stabilization is a
Lucky
steep
grass.
slope blend of a conservation mix, which has got clover in it and a little bit of ryegrass, so it comes up quick, and I don't know what else. That's pretty typical. Trying to do it in wildflowers, I think, personally, is a challenge.
Bill, will that have to be maintained once it starts to grow? No?
It is stable though, you know, I mean, the number one issue is if
Yeah.
it's stable. If you go out there and look at it, there's been absolutely no erosion out there whatsoever. It is
looked
stable.
pretty good, stable.
Yeah.
Was that hay left over from last year, or?
No, you know,
That was put on
the
this
hay is
year?
just a mulch to hold the seed in
Yeah,
place
okay.
and to prevent erosion, and I think that's working well. And it's starting to green up. If you go there, you start
Yeah.
seeing the little stuff come, but
So, right now you said that you contacted him and asked him to overseed it?
I told them they ought to consider it.
Oh, okay.
And I think they're seriously considering it. But if you don't want that done, as soon as I leave, I'll make a call up there to Bill Carr, who's kind of the lead guy on that. Kind of,
What's the board's feeling on this?
I'm kind of, I've on a few occasions seen, both an industrial as well as like the highway, try to do wildflower mix. And he's absolutely right. The best I've ever seen is somebody put up with it for about 3 years and then it's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, you can't maintain it. So I would not be in favor. They might as well put some grass up there.
I think it's gonna be a highway, so avoid putting any crown bait down there, that's gonna take over the whole golf course.
do what?
Not put any crown veg seed in it. That typical highway mix has crown veg in it,
I don't know.
that
Crown
stuff is
veg?
brutal, yeah.
Well, it's probably at an elevation where it's not, it's just slower, because I know that our yard is higher than the other, as I drive up the hill, I see other people have flowers, and when I get to our yard,
Oh, yeah.
they haven't come out yet. So it's, like, elevation is everything.
Yeah.
So you just have to have patience too, it's,
Okay.
you know.
Any other comments? I would think we'd want it green as fast as we can get it green.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's gonna, that'll last longer, right? I mean, or.
Conservation mix, you said.
Oh, yeah, the ryegrass,
Yeah.
Right.
the rye will die out, but everything else will
Yeah.
eventually take over, right?
Well, the rye comes in quick,
Yeah.
and then it allows the other grass to grow,
Take
it.
then the rye won't come next year, so it'll.
So it would only have to be seeded this 1 year, and then it just is automatic. Right.
That's what they should do, then, I would think.
So since it was part of a discussion at the planning board, do we need to send something up saying?
Well, he's saying they've
Well-
already made a decision. You think they are gonna put some,
I
Overmix.
suggested it, and they were taking it under very
Eh,
strong
serious
advisement, but I
advisement,
think they
right.
would follow your guidance.
If the planning board gonna have, an ability to get an email out to them, I think, I agree with you, it might make it a little firmer.
Make it greener.
Well, I mean, their decision to do it.
It would help convince them more.
My feeling was that they were inclined to do it, but if you don't want them to do it, I think we should tell them
Oh,
to stop. But today'd be a good day to put it down, for example.
Well, you know, it sounds to me like they met their obligation, they did put down the seed, so they met the approval criteria. But I think the comments, the feedback is that we would like to see it greener, quicker. And I'm not sure what the best way the planning board can add to your request that they overseeded.
Let me ask you one question. If they overseeded it, is it a problem with the planning board?
I don't think so.
No.
No.
Okay.
Just let it go.
I think we'll be okay then.
Yeah.
Can we somehow add your support for that, to that request?
Oh, absolutely. I think it'll be done, it'll probably be done within the next week.
And how can we add to that, to your request? Or do we have to do anything?
No.
Okay.
I think it's okay.
Okay, good, thank you, Joe. Any other privilege of the floor?
Just one thing, Mark, the Brock's discussion the other day was in the public record, right? All right, let's get you, this is for information, all right? And I'm gonna start this as saying this is not highly probable at all, but the Brocks have, who own the property down along the 5 Mile Bridge, have authorized, the selectmen have authorized Mark now to begin to discussions with the Forest Service about possibility of swapping their land, the land adjacent to town. They're willing to go ahead with it. I don't expect anything to come out of this, but keep your fingers crossed, maybe we'll get lucky.
Is there a proposed
Nope,
plan?
nope, we're
no?
just gonna find out if they're even willing to talk to us
Okay.
first. If they are willing to talk to us at some point in time, obviously, the planning board will get involved, all right? Is certainly, you're gonna have to figure out if there were a parcel and that people could agree on what would we zone it, all of those things, so. But, we're at least, gonna find out if they wanna talk.
Okay, that sounds positive. Good luck.
Yeah.
Oh, and I see like father, like son has moved out of town, so we still have that salt bin? That just.
So it should be gone.
Oh, it is
Supposed to be
gone? Okay, I didn't drive by.
The pad will be the only thing left there.
Okay, I didn't look. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?